felt really privileged when I was asked to present on the physical effects of device use in adolescence alongside Sam's mental effects. But I have to admit, I was at first a little hesitant to put this up because it sounds so melodramatic. But what I mean by this is that back in the 1950s, when everyone was puffing away quite happily on their cigarettes, and doctors were maybe seeing a few troublesome coughs in their offices, we didn't see the true impact of that until 20 years later in the form of lung cancer. And what I'm seeing right now at the coalface of physiotherapy in kids, adolescents, in their spines is actually quite terrifying. So forgive me if I get a little bit evangelical. So I spent my life in performance sport. I've got a background in adolescent health and postgraduate qualifications, but probably my greatest experience or claim to expertise is raising my own 23-year-old twin boys through their own digital adolescence. And I'd really like today, hopefully, highlight some of the issues we're seeing and give some tools to change it. So thoracic hyperkyphosis, that's kind of a fancy medical word we use to describe the rounded back that we generally see in the elderly. Except, unfortunately, it's no longer in the elderly. So this is a 14-year-old boy who came to my clinic with back pain, and I just asked him to sit naturally, and that's exactly how he is. And this is kind of normal these days, and we're seeing it more and more. The trouble is, what happens when you sit like that for a long time, the stress on the back of your spine there, on the ligaments, makes them eventually become useless. It's like elastic that's been stretched too long and they stop working. Then you get compression on the front of the bones there. That leads to chronic inflammation that eventually calcifies, and eventually this becomes your fixed position that you can't get out of. And at that point, it's irreversible. And people say to me, I know I've got a stoop back, I know I've got a bit of a rounded back. Okay, but it's more than that. So if you look at the picture on the left there, straight spine, or relatively straight, we have subtle curves, they're biomechanically designed like that. As soon as you exaggerate the curve in the upper back, you get compensations. The biggest one is the head moves forward. What that then leads to is, first of all, it's the fastest way to arthritis in your neck. So you get a compression between the fifth and sixth joints. And if you saw the number of 20 and 30-year-olds now I see in the clinic with early arthritis in the neck, it's actually scary. And kids are now starting like this at 12 and 13. God help them in the next 10 years. It's the best way to get headaches. The muscles that run from the base of your skull right through to the back of your shoulders, when your head's forward, it's like pulling reins all day and you start getting headaches. It causes jaw problems. So when your head sits in this position, your jaw is this great little joint. Biomechanically, it's then altered and you start getting jaw problems, and we're seeing this around the world right now. It also leads to snoring. So poor posture, you go to bed at night like this, your jaw falls open and you snore. So any men, get their posture changed. Lower back pain. So that upper back leads to lower back pain. So the mirror image of the neck and the lower back, again, the fifth joint in both of those, it causes compression and it leads to wear and tear. Shoulder problems, when you've got a stoop back, it's impossible to lift your arm up. And this is really important in my job in performance sports. So anybody in basketball, overhead sports like swimming, it creates all sorts of issues. And the last one is breathing. So we know asthmatics who have poor posture have poorer breathing outcomes. And don't underestimate this, because the way you hold yourself dictates how you feel and also dictates how people perceive you. And there's any number of studies showing this. And once it becomes fixed, your perception, people's perception of you also becomes fixed. So I actually have a head in a bag, but I'm probably the only person who carries a head in a bag. Your head, but I've only got one hand. So your head weighs 5 or 6 kilograms. When it sits on top of your head in good alignment, like the ladies in Africa with the baskets on their neck, it actually has very little impact. But for every 2.5 centimeters forward, the head weight doubles because of the lever. So if you're only 7 centimeters forward, you're weighing almost a bag of cement on the joints, and they cannot sustain that. And look at this kid here, and at first glance you think, oh, that's not too bad, until you drop a plumb bob down. And you see his ear is already probably a couple of centimeters forward, so his head weight is probably 10 or 12 kilograms already, and that just gets worse with age. Unfortunately, that's the new norm, and this is what we're seeing all the time. You stand at a bus stop, that's what you see. And so this is becoming normal. And when you look at this is a statistic where neck pain in adolescents in a lot of developed countries has overtaken asthma now in years liver disability. I remember when I first started work, if any teenager came in with neck pain, my first thought was, oh my God, meningitis. These days I just ask how many hours they spend on their computers. Just going to quickly anatomy lesson. Now, basically your skeleton, your spine is a bag of bones with no support whatsoever. But, and this is my favorite slide where I've got to not get distracted here. Basically, you have two sets of muscles in your body. You've got ones that hold you up and protect you, and you've got ones that move you, and they're not interchangeable. So the ones on the left there, they're the muscles that support you. It's kind of like, I call that the core muscle. It runs from the base of your skull all the way to your feet. These are the ones, like I said, they're like low-watt bulbs. They work all the time. It's what's holding your neck up now, and you're not even thinking about them. They're kind of cool as well because they're actually very small, and they're attached right to the skeleton. And so they act like a school of fish. If one moves, the others all react very quickly. So that's what gives you good balance. But outside that, back to the other slide again, you have what we call the phasic muscle. That's the beach muscle. They're the show ponies of the world. So they look nice, but they can cause problems. So the two muscle systems act together. The tonic muscle that support you, I think of as the little rotor on the helicopter. The big muscles are the big rotor. That's power. And you've all seen the movie where, you know, the tail gets shot off the helicopter and it spins out of control and it crashes, and that's what happens when you get this sort of setup. So I'm just going to take you back to babies. So this is the most important stage of human development. So what happens here is babies crawling learn to differentiate between those two muscle systems. So they learn to stabilize and they learn to move their arms and legs, and that's where it's the key moment in a child's life. So don't encourage your kids to walk early, don't encourage them to stand early, and definitely don't use jolly jumpers. And again, this is my second favorite slide because I look at this kid. He's probably 2 years old. So by age 2, your head weighs about 80% of an adult. By age 5, it's 90%. So it doesn't grow much after that. Yet he's able to hold this up quite easily because the alignment of his spine and his intrinsic muscle is going at that time. And then he loses it. Like the old days. And then we look at this, and this is where it all starts to fall apart. So I don't even need to talk about the slide. You've all seen this, and it's obvious, but the stress on these kids' backs, and I look at the girl on the right who's probably age 14, and she's already got the posture and the spinal habits of an old person. At her age, that just gets worse and worse. And like I said, if you look at the statistics of what's happening with spinal fusions in the neck, it's happening in the 30 and 40-year age bracket because by then the damage is done. So this is it. There's the 14-year-old on the left, and then on the right is the 23-year-old, my son's flatmate, unfortunately. So what we do when we're growing, it stays with us and it becomes irreversible, and it affects us later in life. Now, later in life used to be at 70, but unfortunately it's now affecting us earlier and earlier. And like we spoke about before, Sam spoke about with the teenage brain being susceptible to alcohol and social media, this is the age where our bodies are most susceptible to sustained postures as well, and most affected by our habits. And this is the million-dollar question, okay? I don't have a silver bullet. I wish I did. But social media, phones, devices, computers are here to stay, and they're useful tools. But in the same way a carrot is until you poke yourself in the eye. So I look at things like the chair. You know, when people have sore backs, their natural thing is to go and buy a better chair, an ergonomic chair, a more supportive chair. But unfortunately, what that does is the exact opposite of what we want. It basically detrains the muscles that support you and protect you and causes more problems. And I look on the right at old Taylor Swift there. This is a form postural bra that Taylor Swift was snapped wearing during rehearsal on the Eras tour. Apart from the fact that sales went up 400% that day, and again, I'd be the first, if Taylor's influence was going to change posture in kids, I'd be the first to support her. But braces don't work in the same way chairs don't work. So what happens is all they do is they pull you into a frame, but they don't create the muscle that holds you there. They're a tool, but they're not the be-all and end-all. So when I talk about solutions that actually make a real difference, I've divided into two categories. Young kids, that's where we have our most influence, is that early age. And basically, good digital health should be ingrained in a young child the way brushing their teeth is. So boundaries on the phones, etc. The second thing is active play. This is where children develop the intrinsic muscle that supports their skeletons for the rest of their life. Get them outside, keep them playing, climb trees. I know that sounds like the old days, but it's exactly what we need to actually build up the strength. We see this in performance sport as well. We call them active couch potatoes. So what we've got in high-level sports now is an athlete who's paid a lot of money to sit at home and play PlayStation for most of the day and come for 2 hours intense training, and that's all he does. He's lost that sort of old school farmer strength that you used to get from, like I said, I do sound like my grandfather now, like chucking hay bales, digging holes like they used to in the old days. And our injuries have changed completely from when I first started work, and we have to deal with them in a different way. Then there's teenagers. Then good luck. So the first thing I'm going to say is education. Now, when I get, this is stuff that should be taught in schools, and I can't believe it, or maybe it is, but I've never heard of it. But when I get teenagers in the clinic and I teach them this sort of thing, I can tell you the engagement is incredible. As soon as they got understanding, they really get on board. And I can tell you I've seen some life-changing examples in this. When the teenagers understand, they do buy in. They just need the knowledge. The second thing is show them. The most powerful tool I've ever used in the clinic is a side-on photo. iPhones were great. And you show people what they look like sideways, and it's frightening. And again, I've got a rogues gallery which I could show people. But take a photo of yourself, take a photo of your teenager, and have a look at it. It is so visually graphic. Environment, like I just bagged the chair, but what I'm going to say at home, if there's one thing you can do, is don't use phones, etc., on soft surfaces like your bed and your sofa. It just turns children's spines into question marks rather than exclamation marks. And last thing, harden teenagers, but encourage them to keep active. Gym programs build the outside muscle. They do not build the inside muscle. And what we're ending up with is a generation of gala apples who are kind of all polished and shiny on the outside, but soft on the inside. And this is actually leading to a whole issue in sports where we're seeing ACL ruptures in knees and shoulder dislocations in teenagers going through the absolute roof. And that's because, like I said, they're focusing on strength, not on stability. Old school stuff like hacky sack creates that internal muscle. And last thing, and maybe most importantly, is don't be this parent. I stand in the supermarket watching parents bent over their phone with the kids sitting there and then telling the kid to stay off the phone. It doesn't work. So I'm going to paraphrase this and say, you know, what we should have been doing 10, 15 years ago with our kids when the digital revolution was happening was looking after them. We didn't really know the damage. And like I said, the stuff I'm seeing at the coalface now, I never saw this 15, 20 years ago. It just did not exist. And so I'm having to change the way I treat. But we have to act now. It's not a conversation anymore. It really is a call to action because this generation in their next sort of 10 or 15 years is in really big trouble. So hopefully you can join me in the revolution. Thanks very much.